Let me tell you, I've seen it all. I didn't know I couldn't upgrade to business. Yeah, right. They're clients. I gotta get.
Our dear friend and colleague, Rachel Maddow, the host of the Rachel Maddow Show here on MSNBC. So I did some of the, stuff that makes your ears blush in the last hour. But I want to start with you, with what was objected to and what wasn't. Judge Merchan sustained almost all of the defense's objections, but they weren't about the stuff he's in trouble for legally. I mean, this is about this compressed period between Access Hollywood dropping and Election Day. And all that testimony is now on the record unchallenged by Trump's defense team. Why?
Yeah, it's really interesting because the distance between the specific crime that is alleged here and what the prosecution needs to prove in order to establish that beyond a reasonable doubt, the distance between that and what the defense seems upset is being described in court feels very, I'm assuming they're being driven by their client here, right? And by what's important to him. And I'm not sure that anybody really thinks that Trump didn't do this, right? I'm not sure that in any of Trump's cases that the best defense for him is to say that these things didn't happen. And I know he's denied the sexual encounter itself, but he's also, his defense team said in their opening statements that those really were legal retainer payments for Michael Cohen. And even though Michael Cohen had never been paid that way before, that's of course what Trump thought it was. And of course the sexual encounter never happened. I mean, there's a real world impact of this stuff that I think is quite separate from his innocence or guilt. And I think his lawyers are defending him in terms of the real world impact of this overall story. And I feel like his guilt in front of the jury, as narrowly defined by the charges that have been brought in this case, is kind of a secondary story in terms of its importance to him.
I mean, that is so clarifying. And as I was following this on the Google Doc that lets us track real time, and someone on my team is in the courtroom, and this was the first day that I got twitchy when I couldn't follow along in real time. But you're right. There has been for him no separation of the legal and the political, and it has now bled out to his lawyers. And we should say the notes and the admonitions were about describing his body parts and describing the sexual act. Those aren't at the heart, really, of the falsifying of business records, right? And no disputing that between the drop of Access Hollywood and the hush money being frantic. And I was thinking about the testimony from the banker. Is it Gary Farrow? Some of the driest testimony was bolstered by some of the most explosive testimony when you get into motive and action. And the motive is the political crisis created by Access Hollywood, and the action is this bungled hush money scheme filtered through Michael Cohen.
Right. I mean, we've got the prosecution. I mean, the defense will put on their case, and we will see what they do. But with all the witnesses that we have seen, including the cross-examination, we've got Hope Hicks, who is, no enemy of Donald Trump, saying that, yeah, he expressed to her that it was way better that this all didn't come out until after the election. And we've got his own financial people working out in writing the way that this was going to be essentially covered up in Trump Organization business records, even though what it was a reimbursement to Michael Cohen for paying for this story. I mean, the elements that they need to, again, I'm not a lawyer, but the elements that they need to prove for the relatively straightforward, document-driven story that undergirds these charges, that story has been told, and it's not hanging on any one individual witness, and every witness who is telling a crucial part of it has corroborating documents or other witnesses on their side of the ledger. And so I feel like the defense sort of has to decide, if they're going to try to contest these things. I don't think they've been very effective at contesting the black letter law issues. That are the black letter law matters that are at issue here. And so I think they've decided instead that they're going to try to protect Trump in terms of the real world and political impact of this case. And I don't think that's working either. I mean, Stormy Daniels' testimony today, to have the judge say to Trump's defense lawyers, I was kind of expecting you to object a little bit more than you did. To have the judge, sua sponte, having to object himself because Trump's lawyers weren't objecting on his behalf. I mean, we all know about the pajamas now, right? Like, we all heard the condom-related testimony. All of this stuff is there, and his defense team has let it ring out in the courtroom.
Yeah, I mean, and because you went there, I'll follow you. I mean, the thing with covering Trump for 9 years is you know that when he went on foreign trips, he wouldn't eat because he was germophobic and he's xenophobic. And so I know from my own reporting that when he traveled to India, he wouldn't eat. I mean, his whole thing with COVID and this whole thing with touching, he didn't want to be touched. I mean, his conversation the first time he meets Stormy Daniels when they have sex is about her time in the adult film industry and whether they wear condoms. She talks about being tested. He wants to know how they protect themselves from STDs. It's so on brand. Again, it's her testimony. A jury will decide if it is or is not credible. But to your point about the lawyers doing double duty, serving both as his criminal defense team and his political protectors, all that stuff certainly rings true to the broader narrative we've come to know about Donald Trump.
Yes. And, I mean, listen, there's the very big picture here, Nicolle, is, I mean, we're thinking seriously as a country about putting somebody back in the White House who mounted a violent effort to overthrow the government the last time that he was voted out, who says that parts of the Constitution should be terminated, who says he wants to put the U.S. military in American cities. He wants to build camps for tens of millions of people, right? Like, that's what we're thinking about doing. There's like this huge yikes factor when it comes to him. But part of the reason he wants to destroy the rule of law and thinks that parts of the Constitution must be terminated is because in cases like this, where he's facing more than 30 of the more than 80 felonies he's charged with, it just seems plain that the evidence is very, very, very strongly against him. And so on top of the scariness about what he's offering us as a political figure, on top of his likely criminal liability in these multiple criminal trials, we also then just get this yuck factor stuff, right? I mean, he invites her. She's doing a porn company promotion at a golf tournament. His infant son is 4 months old. He has his bodyguard ask her if she'd like to have dinner. So she goes to his room. There is no dinner. He's wearing satin pajamas. She says, get dressed. He tells her, I'll get you onto my reality competition TV show and I will help you cheat at it. Right? He gives her he says, I'll give you advance notice of the challenges on the show and that will help you. He tells her, oh, me and my wife don't sleep in the same room. He asks her when she was last tested for sexually transmitted diseases. He tells her she reminds him of his daughter. She goes to the bathroom. She comes out of the bathroom and he is stripped down to his underpants. And she tries to leave. And he steps between her and the door. And she doesn't want to do it. She says she doesn't feel threatened, but he says to her, I thought you were serious about what you wanted. If you ever want to get out of that trailer park, they have sex. She is not into it. He does not wear a condom. That is particularly concerning to her, and he should know that it is because she has just explained that to him about her work in the adult film industry. They meet several more times. He makes more sexual advances. They never have sex again. And ultimately, it is only when he finally says, no, I'm not putting you on my TV show, that she stops picking up his calls. I mean, that's the character. I mean, Jimmy Carter almost lost in 1976 because he said he'd committed lust in his heart. But this is who we're thinking about putting back in the White House right now, along with what he is threatening to do to the country, in part out of anger for the criminal liability that he has brought on himself by trying to cover up things like this, behavior like this, character like this. I mean, she said today, I have no shame, talking about her career choices. And there's no reason she should. She's got self-determination. She has given herself the career that she wants. But we can have shame. You know, we can have shame about our political choices as a country in terms of who we are elevating as America's face to the world. And today is just, I mean, none of us will ever get this taste out of our mouth.
I think that's right. I also think we made a mistake in covering him as so hapless and accidental. I mean, you didn't, but a lot of us did. He came out of the gate. What was his first thing? What does the publisher of the New York Times go to the White House to talk to him about? Describing all of us as enemies of the people. Why did he need his base to think that and we were disoriented by it, right? We thought, ooh, that will really endanger journalists working abroad, and it does. But it wasn't about that. It was about us. It was about today. It was about making damn sure that when today came around, when the public learned that Stormy Daniels would testify to the sex she had with Donald Trump while his infant son was 4 months old, that his base would say, no way. My guy, he didn't do that. And if he did, man, what do they even say? What a stud. I mean, it's weak and gross. And the satin pajamas, I don't have any clue how that fits in to the image. But it makes him more, I don't want to use the word strategic because that's not it. but his primal desire to survive and thrive, knowing exactly what his life had been up to the moment when he became president, drove everything.
Yes, and so you have to prime your followers for there is no knowable truth, there are no facts, anything that you see is represented as science or expertise or journalism isn't real. You can only believe what I tell you, right? The facts are what I say the facts are, right? And the right has done this to a certain extent, right, in demonizing journalism for a very long time, right? But he took it to a different level in saying that unless it was praising him, it wasn't real. And that is setting up your followers to follow only you and to accept what you tell them and to do what you tell them. And the courts that he's got to spend time in now because of these multiple criminal and civil cases are places where there are no alternative facts, where there are only facts, and that it's an adversarial process, and he's got good lawyers who are representing him vigorously. But the evidence is tested, and it's subject to law and the judgment of trained jurists. And there isn't any way around it other than getting your followers to tune it out and to tell them that this is persecution and that nothing happens in that courtroom is real law. And in order to make that case to the public, you need to make the case that the judicial system in America is bunk and is rigged and is just designed to persecute Donald Trump and his followers, and it therefore must be dismantled. The authoritarian project and the anti-rule of law project are the same project, and you can see on days like today more clearly than any other times why that is.
Well,